There's no question that fertilizer prices have gone up substantially, and with all the nutrients you look at, probably the worst one has been potash. It's ridiculously high priced.
It is, and I like to be an optimist, and I try to look at the bright side of things all the time, and I'm really having a difficult time finding where the bright side is on this potassium deal.
It's a great thing for the potash companies, Brian. They're making good money.
Well, they are. But let's go through on your farm, how much can you afford to pay for potassium? We'll talk about corn, soybeans, and wheat.
Well, with all of these crops, what you have to consider and what we're going to put together on our charts is how much yield are you going to gain with a potash application on your farm. Now, depending on if you're using potash in corn, soybeans, or wheat, there are going to be some differences, but we have to look at every one of your fields and say, you know what, this field, I'm a little short in potash. This field, I've got plenty. Maybe you need to cut back on some of those because you may not be able to gain as many bushels on one field as the next.
Okay, so here's what we did to put this chart together. We just looked at 200 bushel corn on our farm because this year we averaged 200 bushel corn. Well, the grain only removes about 60 units of K2O from the soil. So to replace that, we need 100 pounds of potash because potash is 0,060. So if we put 100 pounds out there times 60%, that gives us that 60 actual units of K2O we removed with our 200 bushel corn. Okay, so what I'm saying is if we put 100 pounds of potash out there, let's say we get an 8 bushel yield increase from that, and let's say we can lock in our corn for next fall at $4 a bushel. If you look at our chart that we put together here, that means we can afford to pay $640 per ton for potash. Unfortunately today, potash is significantly higher than that. So what I'm saying is, let's just say, for example, you had to pay $900 a ton for your potash, and you get $640 back in terms of your yield increase times the price. Every $900 you spend, you only get $640 back. That doesn't sound like a very good equation to me.
Well, it's actually better than putting money on Wall Street this year, Brian. You're at least only going to lose a little bit of your investment. Now, you've got to guess what the crop price is going to be that you're marketing at. So if you're locking in a crop price for this fall, yes, it's a negative return on investment right now. If you're bullish like me and you think, the market's going to get a little better, maybe I'm going to get $5 for my corn, all of a sudden that changes the economics here, and you may be able to pay a little bit more for that potash. So don't say, well, I'm never going to make money at this and feel all bad about it, because you might.
This is just a little different way to look at fertilizer rather than just doing the same old thing you've always done, which is call up somebody else, have them do the soil testing, and have them make the decisions for you. This is a way to look at it on a break-even basis.
Okay, corn at 200 bushels takes out about 60 pounds of K2O, and you think, wow, that's terrible. Let's look at soybeans. Soybeans actually take out 84 pounds of K2O for every 60 bushels of soybeans, so the economics here are quite interesting as well.
Okay, so let's say that you could get a 5 bushel yield increase from putting out this potassium at 84 pounds, what we just removed with the grain. To get that, we'd have to put out 140 pounds of potash. That would give us 84 actual units of K2O. Okay, so with a 5 bushel yield increase, and let's say that we figure our beans next fall, new crop 09, will be $9.25. Our break even there is $661. That's how much we can afford to pay per ton of potash. Again, if you were paying $900, you would only get $661 back based on your yield increase and the price you expect for the soybeans. That's not a real great investment. But keep in mind, we're figuring 9 1/4 beans, maybe they'll be higher, and maybe you'll have more yield gain. But at least this kind of gives you a general idea of what you can afford to pay for potash in soybeans.
Okay, let's look at wheat, because the economics here are just a little bit different as well. When you're talking about 100 bushel wheat, you're removing about 35 pounds of K2O. So it's not as much potash coming out of the ground with that wheat crop as it was with the corn or the soybeans. So let's say you had a fall price of $5.75 on wheat, or a harvest price of $5.75, and you could gain 5 bushels by putting that potash on your wheat. You could afford to pay $991 per ton for the potash. So here it is a positive return on investment where you'll get more money back than what you spent on the fertilizer if you could gain just 5 bushels of wheat.
But that's the big question. And again, this is something only you can answer on your farm. How much do you think putting that potash is going to gain you in corn, in soybeans, in wheat? And what do you expect your price to be that you're going to get for the commodities? Just run the numbers and you'll be able to figure this out a lot better on your own farm.
Well, we're talking about the economics here, not the agronomics. Now,
right.
Agronomically, it's not a smart move to not put at least as much nutrient out there as you're taking out of the soil. soil. We don't want to mine the soil, at least not on a long-term basis. What we're looking at is the economics here of application this year at these crazy high fertilizer prices. Because look, if we don't use fertilizer this year and we say, you know what, it's not worth it on my farm, I'm not going to get enough money back to cover it, what are the companies selling the fertilizer going to have to do? They're going to have to lower their prices. So we hate to reward these ridiculously overpriced fertilizers, but by the same token, you can't afford to deplete your soil very long either.
Well, another thing you can't afford to do is let weeds get out of control, especially our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you what it is coming up next.